Can we get much higher?
Hello everybody, welcome back to another video, this time with the F11 F-1 Tiger. Honestly, this thing is one of my favorite planes of all time. It's my channel logo and it's my YouTube banner, so you already know I like this thing. I fire a missile at that Saab 105, and at this range it should hit. However, he does dive down, which means he's going to start draining that missile of its energy, so it unfortunately doesn't get close enough. When this thing came out, it was the only Supersonic in the battle rating range that saw the 8.7 matchmaker, which was fairly common at the time. So I used to spam this thing out a lot, and nobody could catch me. It kind of reflects in my stats, however, so, I mean, if you look at my stat card, I barely have a 1-to-1 KD, and that's because I had to play this thing a bunch for footage for this video. I dive down on this G91, and I pull my air brake out, because if I go a little too fast, I'll start compressing a little too much. But while I'm in the dive, I should have just enough airspeed to retain my full maneuverability. I get a crit on the G91, and I'm queuing up a missile just in case he decides to fly straight, because you can usually catch people during those slow moments with the AIM-9Bs. The G91 tries to break off, but I can easily catch him as I have a better thrust to weight on Afterburner than a MiG-15 BIS, though it isn't as maneuverable and bleeds a little bit more speed, which makes it less of a dogfight monster. The G91 decides he loves the ground more than the air, and he does an emergency landing, albeit without gear and nose first into the ground, giving me my first kill. Off to my left is a Canberra, and I want to get it out of the match right now if I can. The thing is, it's kind of a third-party machine, and despite being labeled as a bomber, actually turns really well, and with the Hispanos, has the potential to just click me out of the sky if the HE rounds hit on me. I roll around his guns, and this sets up the A4E on my team to get a good pass in on him, which he luckily hits his shots, and this frees me up to go on to the next target. This G91 ends up being the last fighter on the enemy team, so I'm just going to spam all my missiles off at him. Shot number 1 doesn't hit, as the AIM-9B just doesn't pull hard enough. The G91 gets sprayed at by another G91, and unfortunately, because he passed in front of the missile, it loses its track as well. I launch the third off, and it gets close, but the G91 once again pulls hard enough to dodge it. I line up for a gun run here, just barely miss, giving him a haircut, but my teammates fortunately managed to get the kill. At the start of the match, I tend to climb as it gives my missiles better performance, plus I'm supersonic up here, meaning a lot of stuff like the MiG-17 and MiG-15 BIS can't catch me. My AIM-9B misses, but I easily click him out of the air. In reality, I didn't think this would hit. I go for this MiG-21 as I'm one of the only supersonics on my team, if there are even any other at all, and that means the MiG-21 will be able to just run trains on my team, which I don't want happening. I whip a 180 so I can chase down this MiG-21 again, but I actually make the decision to pull off as I don't want to give a Swift my tail for free. That thing does basically everything I do, about the same, though is just a little bit slower. Plus, there's a J32 above me, and I don't want that thing on my tail either, as it has 4 AIM-9Bs, and fairly decent energy retention. I climb up a little bit so that I can get to my more maneuverable speeds, and I start pulling in on this J32 and barely dodge a missile from the Saab 105. I'm not really worried about the Saab 105 because that's honestly one of the worst fighters in the game, but you can hear some shots barely going behind my tail. Fortunately, I'm able to hold enough speed, and I'm able to use my flaps a little bit just to be able to make sure I don't get shot by their guns. Plus, they're Sweden players. They have no clue where their guns are going, as the Swedish 30 mils have no tracers, so it's pretty hard to pick up and learn them. We're slowly making our way through a downward spiral to the deck, and this is not a fight I want to stick in for much longer, as the Saab 105 is going to be sitting inside of me, and the J32 is going to be sitting on the outside of me, meaning I'll only really have the option to extend, and that's not very fun. Plus, I out-dogfight the J32, so I just have to make sure the Saab 105 doesn't do a very good job third-partying me. I'm gonna change up the geometry a little bit and go vertical instead of just sticking in the spiral, as this will help me once I get to the vertical, because then I can then whip out my flaps and decrease my turning circle. I loop over the top for this Saab 105, and as it turns out, the J32 decided he was done with the fight and went and got himself killed. I launch an AIM-9B at this Saab 105, and it's a little ambitious, and it means the AIM-9B isn't gonna hit. There was a chance it did, so I felt comfortable firing it off, but it's fine. I have more opportunities to kill this Saab 105. I try to queue up another missile, but he starts a turn that I know the missile will never be able to hit, so I'm gonna go for a gunshot now. He actually manages to fly in between my rounds, which I went back into the match replay to verify, and yeah, awesome. He went in between the gun rounds. He dives to the deck, which actually works out in my favor, as it just means I'm going to be able to catch him faster than, say, if he leveled out when he finished that loop. Considering we have about the same turning ability, and I have higher thrust than him, I can just kind of sit behind him with my air brake out, and he'll never be able to shake me. I go for an AIM-9B shot, launch it off, and mwah, give a good old kiss to the ground. I don't know why I did, but the F11 just kind of shook it off, so it's fine. Off in front of me are two targets, the Sea Vixen and a Lightning that's unspotted. The Lightning is a pretty scary opponent in the F11, as it does basically everything you do but better, so I want to be able to make sure to get him out of the match as quickly as possible. I launch an AIM-9B off at him, and even though it's at like 4.5 kilometers, because we're at the altitude we're at, it's going to have much more range. I also go for a gunshot on the Sea Vixen, and get a crit, and then he dies. I then dive down for this Key 200, but I'm not going to be able to pull off for him, so I level out so I'm able to extend away. I'm going to cut ahead though, as I'm sure you guys don't want to watch me extend for 5 minutes. Below me right now are a G91 and the same Key 200, chasing an F9F on my team. I'm going to help out my fellow Navy brother here, so I'm going to cut my throttle, whip out my air brake, and dive down on him. As long as this guy stays straight, I can get both my missiles off on them, and it'll be easy kills as they're pretty tunnel visioned and not paying attention to me diving on them. As you know, gamers don't look up, and most War Thunder players don't look behind them either. Unfortunately for me, the F9F pulls off to a different direction, meaning I'm not going to have a straight shot with my AIM-9s, and I don't want to enter a dogfight either. I let him know this in chat, as it'll likely help him improve as a player, as baiting is a pretty important skill to learn if you want to be able to do well in, well, any tier for that matter. Especially when you're in jets like the F11, where you're not the best dogfighter, it's really good to know how to bait for your team. I know this because I'm really good at baiting myself. You could even call me a master baiter. I whip myself back around as the G91's being a bit indecisive, and I can capitalize on this, turning this into a 1v1 instead of having to fight the Key 200 at the same time. I'm chasing him in down, and I still have 3 missiles left on my rails, so I'm going to try and fire them off. Unfortunately, he goes 180 for me, though I can just try and shoot at the Key 200 now, as I thoroughly outrun him. He's in a light rocket plane, and I'm in a supersonic missile bus. My team, however, gets a kill on the Key 200, so I'm going to switch targets to the Sea Vixen. I'm just going to leave the G91 completely in the dust behind me, and not really think about him for the rest of the match, as he's not even going to be close enough to me to even fire off a missile and have it hit. This Sea Vixen dives to the deck, and this is good for me because now I get to dive on top of him. I want to chase him down because I'm faster than him, and get them out of the match as often as possible, because Sea Vixens don't require much thinking. They go really fast, climb pretty well, and just launch red tops at people who can't dodge them, which is not a good recipe for success if I want to win this match. That's all for this video. Remember to subscribe if you enjoyed it, as every little support helps. Also, if you'd like to support me directly, I have a Patreon in the description, so make sure to check that out. Finally, I have a Discord server, so if you'd like to be part of a growing community of active War Thunder players, make sure to join that. Other than that, that's all for this video. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.